Stigma is pretty complicated in terms of when we're talking about how to address it, because we have to be very specific about what we're addressing when we're talking about stigma. So there is stigma among physicians themselves. There is stigma among psychiatrists and mental health care professionals. And then there is also racial discrimination and other forms of discriminations that play into the intersectionality of patients' identity when they come into the healthcare system. And so if you're coming in with symptoms of schizophrenia, whether you've been diagnosed or not diagnosed yet, so pre-diagnosis, as you're being evaluated and diagnosed, and then post-diagnosis. So if you're a woman coming into a mental health care system and you're seeking a diagnosis, or you already have a diagnosis of schizophrenia, or you have symptoms of psychotic or symptoms of a psychotic disorder, there are so many aspects of your identity that have a role to play in how your experience plays out within the mental health care system. And so your gender matters, your race matters, your age matters, and your socioeconomic status matters. And all of those factors come together to produce what we might see as, one, internalized stigma, meaning the stigma of the individual, the patient who has the diagnosis experiences, but also will factor into the kind of stigma that you might experience among mental health professionals. And all of those things come together to then, in many ways, limit the positive outcome in terms of treatment and recovery that we tend to hope for. So for something like schizophrenia, what we have in terms of research that has been done, one particular study it was done by published in the World Journal of Psychiatry. It looked at racial aspects of diagnosis when it comes to schizophrenia and other psychotic disorders. And they found that Black people were 3 to 4 times more likely to be diagnosed with schizophrenia or psychotic disorder. Hispanic and Latina people were 3 times more likely to be diagnosed with schizophrenia. And while that particular study did not focus on gender, what was key is that the overdiagnosis of something like schizophrenia also matters in several different significant ways, including things like treatment. So if you're treating something with an incorrect diagnosis, that matters too. So when it comes to people approaching the healthcare system with a diagnosis of schizophrenia, questions we want to ask are, do they really have schizophrenia? Is that a correct diagnosis? Because of their gender, their race, their socioeconomic status, have they been disproportionately diagnosed with this particular illness? I think when it comes to health disparities and racial disparities, Black people, like I said, are disproportionately diagnosed with schizophrenia. It doesn't mean that schizophrenia in and of itself is the problem. I think it means that as a society and as a health system, it's interesting that we tend to tie, something like schizophrenia to racial minorities and to folks who are more socioeconomically disadvantaged. But why that's critical in terms of how we, one, stigmatize the illness, but then how we also stigmatize individuals based on their demographic background, is because we then have to approach the idea of, are we giving people the right treatment? Are we giving them the right resources if we're getting the diagnosis wrong in the first place? And so that's why the idea of cultural sensitivity when it comes to gender is so important in order for us to build upon what we have in the research we've done so far in the area of schizophrenia, but also move forward in a culturally sensitive and humble way to do a better job of addressing people's needs when it comes to something like schizophrenia and the stigma associated with it.